Believe that it's March already. I don't know if you're like me, it's like, oh my goodness, can't believe it's March. But as always, this academy is brought to you in collaboration between the Wisconsin Regional Special Education Network, or RSN, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, or DPI, and the Wisconsin Council of Administrators of Special Services, or WCAS. We're so excited to have so many people on the call. And like I said, still some folks jumping in today. Just a reminder that you can find that agenda in the chat. Our team strives to be inclusive and meet the needs of Wisconsin directors. And the intent of these sessions is to provide you with timely and relevant information so you can do your important work every day in our Wisconsin schools. Just a couple of reminders. We invite you to turn your camera on if you're able. Please mute your microphone unless you're asking a question. We do ask that you use the parking lot document for questions unless otherwise prompted by a presenter. That allows us to capture responses to those questions so that you have them to refer back to. And the parking lot is linked in your agenda for today. Also, a reminder, and I'll mention it again at the end, but you do need to register for each session. So if you have not yet done so, make sure that you register for our April and May sessions, which will be our remaining 2 sessions of this school year. We do record our meetings and they are available after the fact. And so because of that, we do ask that we are the only recorders of the meeting. But we do have a participant folder with resources. All of these things are linked on your agenda, which again, you should be able to find in the chat today. On our agenda today, we have some timely topics. We are opening up with Stephanie Durant to talk about transfer of service. Then we'll have a brief break, and Rachel Katarabik from CISA 7 will be here to continue our discussion on high leverage practices. And we'll wrap up the day with Dawn Soto, who will be discussing the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standards and Access Center. If you could take a moment to just make sure that you are renamed with your first and last name and your CISA number, that you have your microphone muted, your camera on if you are able, and we will welcome Stephanie.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Stephanie Durant, and I'm just going to take a moment to get my slide sharing here for you. It really did just work. There we go. All right, can you all see that
That looks
slide?
perfect.
Okay. And I'm going to get you guys on my other screen. I do have a few screens open here. So again, my name is Stephanie Durant, and I'm one of the school administration consultants with the Bureau of School Financial Services with the DPI. I've been here since August of 2025. Prior to that, I have worked in school business offices in various capacities, but none in special education. I mean, I've worked with directors and such, but I say all of that because you really will be the experts in your field. That won't be me. So if I do say some terminology and you think, that probably is true. You definitely will have that area of expertise there. My focus here will be on getting that transfer of service process out there for you. I do have a lot of materials to try to get through, so I was hoping if you did have any questions, put them in the chat. If we can get to them, we will. If not, I will email your questions separately. If you would have district-specific questions, again, I would be very happy to answer any questions that might come up. In my PowerPoint, I will have a few links for some resources for you, but I also understand that those in attendance, this PowerPoint would be available in the Google in a shared Google Drive or something. So um, let's see here. So, oh yeah, I will also say that when you do get those, I'm sorry, the presentation, you will notice there might be some slides way at the end of my presentation that I will not get to in this presentation. So the purpose of putting them in there is just to get more information in your hands. There will be some frequently asked questions and a little bit of information about another type of transfer of service called narrative transfer of service, which it just won't be the focus of our discussion today, but it could be beneficial for those that would want to look through that. Lastly, my quick introduction here, if I say the acronym TOS, it slips off my tongue very easily. It means transfer of service. So I appreciate a little grace on that. Um, so by the end of today's time I have with you, my goals would be for you that while we're looking at state statute, kind of define what that transfer of service is and why it is important to districts, as well as help you understand who is eligible for transfer of service. And we're going to do that while we're reviewing pupil transfer of service decision tree, which we do have on our website as well, but kind of a dual learning for you. And lastly, want to get into how to apply for transfer of service. So I am going to try to get through that pretty quickly. So let's start with the first takeaway for today. You know, why we're here. Why would we want to discuss transfer of service? State Statute 121.91 paren 4 paren A3 um, guides that districts may request an exemption to the revenue limit for any student that moves into a district from another governmental unit. They must have come to you or to that district with a previously identified disability or LEP as defined by state statute, and it caused the district to have an increase in cost. So why doesn't a revenue or why does an exemption to the revenue limit, why is that so important? What does that mean? Simply put, I mean, it is an increase to the funds received from the state for your district. Um, and any increase that would be applied for and a district would be approved to receive for transfer of service would be less any estimated categorical aid that might be received on that pupil as well. And then keep in mind too that while we do have state statute guiding this, really applying for a transfer of service is optional. There's no mandate to. There are districts that do choose not to increase their revenue limits. I'm not going to pretend I understand all of those reasons. They would be district specific. Um, but it is just simply not required, but at least we have state statute to guide us if the district would choose to do so. So let's break down transfer of service a bit. Again, transfer of service is is a service for a pupil with a disability or LEP who transferred or moved directly into the district from another governmental unit. And they, again, have to have been previously identified with a need and written in their IEP or their LEP plan. So students must have traveled directly or transferred directly from one governmental unit to another governmental unit, and we'll describe governmental units coming up. But on the contrary,
Stephanie,
there we go.
there
Somebody
you go.
muted me. It's that bad already, huh? So, um, I was just speaking about a student who would travel from one must have come to you from another governmental unit. And we'll talk about what those governmental units are. But on the contrary, a student cannot have been in a previous district, then did some homeschooling or went to a private school and then came to your district. That would have been a break in educational services, and the student would not qualify for transfer of service. So it really is that transition from district to district, and that time frame there is not also um, not beyond 45 days of a lapse in between each governmental district from school to school, for example. So in order for that new district to meet the needs of the student's IEP or the LEP, the district must have increased the costs. Um, of its human resources or of its serviceable resources. And then keep in mind only the increased cost may be applied for transfer service. I will keep stressing that. I don't want to waste my words for this, but it is increased costs that are very important. If the district has those resources for the student, there has not been an increase in cost, so you would not need to, nor can a district file for transfer of service. So the upcoming slides I have, then we're going to talk more about identifying the pupil's needs. Um, that will be in the future. Let's take a step back here before we go on, just to let you know really what a transfer of service is not. Transfer of service is not used to meet ADA requirements. That would be the responsibility of the school board. And also, you may not file transfer of service application for any open enrolled in students. These students can be claimed in the open enrollment process if a district is allowing or has space available for the students. And but really, transfer of service is for resident students, and a student that would open enroll in would not be a resident. Lastly, the transfer of service cannot be used to increase operational budgets for whatever reason. I don't have a good example right now, but also it cannot be used to service existing special ed students or LEP students, as they would already be your pupil. So there are three types of requests, and today's focus will be on the pupils, again, the child with a disability and those with limited English proficient pupils that are transferring in. Um, the third type of request, which I touched on briefly in my introduction, is a narrative. That information will be at the end of this presentation. Basically, that is if a municipality or a county provides a service to a district and no longer can or will do that service, and the district needs to take over the new costs of that, they can write a written narrative. You cannot file for such a request in our transfer of service portal. So I want to turn the focus back now to the pupil transfer of service, where the majority of our transfer of service applications exist. So this takes us to determining eligibility, which is the second takeaway for today's presentation. It does blend with our state statute, of course, but now we'll kind of break down what constitutes that eligibility using the decision tree. And you'll notice on the screens ahead that I will take each question and align it with the eligibility, and we'll just kind of talk about that. So again, this decision tree is also found on our website. You don't need to worry about it. You can take a look at it on the website as well. Um, so the first question for deciding if a student is eligible for a transfer of service, and we touched on it prior, is did the pupil come from another governmental unit that was responsible for providing education? And if the district can answer yes, it can move on the decision tree to see if they meet the next step of eligibility. Um, if the answer is no and the pupil did not come from another governmental unit, for our example, we'll use the student came from homeschool or a private school before coming to you, then they technically did not come from another Wisconsin LEA or other sort of governmental unit, and they would not qualify. You could consider them not eligible. And then those governmental units that I keep referencing are really students that come from another Wisconsin LEA, uh, from public schools outside of Wisconsin, or from other Wisconsin governmental units. And you can see here, like um, from another Wisconsin LEA does mean like public schools, independent charter schools, or juvenile detention facilities, county jails, and group and foster homes, or other county ordered placements. And likewise, the students that would come from a public school outside of Wisconsin, such as another state, a federal government, or a foreign country, could be listed in, they could qualify for transfer of service, and including pupils that may have transferred from another Wisconsin government, such as Wisconsin County's Birth to Three programs and facilities run by the state of Wisconsin. So if the student has come from another governmental unit, you may consider the next question on our decision tree. For eligibility, the question is, did the pupil come with an identified need per state law? Um, so if that decision or that student came to you, to their new resident district with a previously identified need, as outlined in state statute, you can move on to the next question. It means they met that eligible criteria. If they did not come to you with a previously identified need, there's no need to file a transfer of service request on the student. And the emphasis again is with this criteria is that it is a previously identified need. A student cannot come to you and then be reevaluated or evaluated a first time, and then you qualify or apply for a transfer of service. It must have been written in their IEP coming into you. I'm not going to spend too much time on what a child with a disability is or a limited English proficient pupil. That is, again, those are your areas of expertise. I know you know this, but the reason why I wanted to at least include them here, they are important because a student must have one of these disabilities written in their IEP to be considered for a transfer of service. And you will also be asked this question when you are filing the application in the application portal. You'll be asked which disability or disabilities did that pupil have. Likewise, with the limited English pupil, you will be asked if the student came to you with a level 1 through 5 classification, and you would need to certify if they did or not. If they did not, and you have a student identified later, you cannot file that transfer of service on them. And just note too that a district, if a pupil comes to you and needs both services, you will be able to apply for both services. If a student was a student with a disability and an LEP, you would be able to apply for both. So if the student did meet the first two criteria and you're able to move on the decision tree, the next two decisions pertain to student timelines. So I'm going to kind of discuss 3 and 4 separately and together. So if,
Okay.
if what's important about question 3 is that student needs to be coming to you in the fall of
Okay.
2026 for this upcoming period.
That's not right. That's not right.
Um,
I literally saw the paper. She literally gave us a sticky note and it,
if All right, if the student will not be returning in the fall, you cannot apply for a transfer of service. However, if they are, you can move on to the next question. Again, I'm going to review this slide in a moment. Um, if the student is returning in the fall, you need to then consider when the student started attending your district. And again, the question reads, when will or did the pupil start attending your district? Um, the timeline for checking is, did the student start June 1st of 2025 and September 11th of 2026? Um, Let's keep in mind too that if the student did start prior to June 1st of 2025, that student no longer qualifies for transfer of service. And if the student will be attending the district in 26-27 school year, the district can move on the decision tree where you need to go check to see if you've got the resources for that student for the next school year. If the pupil has already attended in 2025-26 school year, we just need to make sure that the student wasn't already applied for transfer of service. And this just kind of summarizes the last 2 slides. For time's sake, I'm going to move on. I wanted to show you this timeline here. Again, a student that may have attended your district prior to June of 2025 cannot be claimed for transfer of service. And on the timeline here, that would be that dark blue area. So pretend you're off the chart. You're off the timeline. You can't apply. Um, but let's look at an example on this chart or on this time frame. If a student started attending, for example, in October of 2025, we're focusing in on this kind of lime green area. Um, that district, you can see, okay, they started in October 2025. They are within the eligible status of June 1st to September 11th. I can apply for a transfer of service for this student. Likewise, let's talk about the future too. You transfer of service process just got all done. Everything was due September of 26. A student comes to you in October of 26. You can't go back, but keep track of that student. You would be able to file transfer of service claim on them in the following application period. And I don't want to confuse the situation, but you can see that there is a little bit of overlap here um, in the months of June through September. If a student would come to you in August of 2026, for example, you can see you do really have a decision to make. Do you want to file a transfer of service for them now, or do you want to wait until the following year? You would need to keep good records and keep track of that student. Um, Versus, I do want to bring up, let's take a year prior. If that student came to you in August of 25, kind of in that dark blue area over there, you're really going to need to see if you already filed a transfer of service on this student in the prior year, because that would be that same overlapping criteria you see here with the lime green and teal colored options there. Again, keeping good records to do a look back to see if that student's been claimed. Um, And just like I said here, did that student was the student already claimed? That's the next decision on that decision tree. Did they already receive a revenue limit increase? Think back to the example I just shared with you on this dark blue area here. Really consider if that student was claimed last year or if you can even claim them this year. If you haven't claimed them, you can move on with that student's eligibility. This slide here is just really showing just a kind of a checklist. How can I keep track of that if a student was here before? And just keeping good records, watching your portal, using the timeline, and talking to people responsible for tracking those students. It might be yourselves or your school business managers or someone in the business office to help you. I just wanted to give you another visual that wasn't all marked up in this area. We're going to move on to the last question on that decision tree of trying to decide if the district has the proper resources the for that student, and how do you do that? Review your resources. Can you use current staff? Do you have the existing resources or services to provide for that student? Uh, Engage your decision makers, have meetings, however you need to decide if those resources are available. But if the district can meet the needs of that student, there's no need to file that transfer of service request, nor can you. Um, or if you can't meet the needs, uh, then you may opt to file a transfer of service claim in the portal. Again, think about, ask yourself, did the arrival of the student cause the district to hire new staff, not shift staff, but hire new staff? Or did they have those services available? An example here would be the district employed 25 paraprofessionals and a student would transferred in with a previously identified need. And now the district must hire a new one-to-one paraprofessional, and that increases its staff count to 26 in the next year. That would be an increase in costs over the prior year. So just a small example of what that means. Um, and then here I wanted to maybe show another example of what a eligible versus a non-eligible transfer of service or an increase in cost means. So that would be the district never had a speech and language teacher before. Now they have a student who needs that service, so they must hire a speech and language teacher. That is an increase in cost. Versus not an increase in cost would be the student has a new, the district has a new student who needs speech and language services and will now participate in the existing speech and language program. So the district did not need to increase its services here. So well, that concludes the discussion on eligibility. I want to move quickly into I think I do have enough time. I want to move quickly then into the third takeaway here, which is submitting an application. So after the district has determined if a student is eligible for transfer of service and wants to submit an application, it must do so through the PI 5000 Transfer of Service portal. This is an online application. There are 3 parts to the application, and the application opens June 1st. The very first important thing in transfer of service is access. If you are the person in your district responsible for transfer of service, and you've done it in the past, just go in and check to make sure your access is still good. Can you log in? Put your password, login information, and can you get in? If you are new to the district or maybe your role has recently changed to include transfer of service, you need to get access assigned to you. It's the time to do that is right now. It's a great time. Everybody is still in district versus trying to do this over the summer when you might have to track down certain people that have access in these areas for you. So do it early, see if you can get in. The administrator or your administrator of the school is the only person who can grant access into the transfer of service portal. And once you do receive your passwords into these areas, keep them safe somewhere so that you're not having to redo the access every year. And just so you note too, the passwords and usernames are case sensitive. Uh, Now, I want you to feel free to print the next 3 slides for your administrators if you need access into the portal. There are detailed instructions on authorizing user and granting access into the portal, um, but I'm not going to go over step by step. I'm going to go through these next 3 slides kind of quickly. I just wanted this information in your hands. Access is one of the biggest holdups in transfer of service. It sometimes isn't necessarily putting the usernames in there. It's how do I need to get in there? Um, so there are 2 different areas that need access for your transfer of service reporting to be successful. The first area is that you must be listed on the PI 1500 District Contacts Report, which is located in Sapphire. That is how you receive data. You must also be listed, if you are the person responsible for this, in the Transfer of Service portal, which is on the same platform as Homer and Open Enrollment, and that is to give you access to file the application. So one kind of gives you access to receive information, and the other gives you permissions per se to file. Again, hand the slide to your administrator or somebody, but the PI 1500 District Contacts Report, again, is that area that grants permission to access so that you can receive data on transfer of service. And it also allows so that you get notified when a district is also looking for information from you. Um, and you can really just find out I guess what you really need to do is find out in your district who has the authority to grant access and on the district contacts list. Typically, that might be a school business manager, an assistant, or the administrator, but that would be the person that needs to help grant you access into, or I'm sorry, get you onto the district contacts if you are not on there to receive data, which is a little bit different than the PI 5000, where only the district administrator can assign you as the person of the district to file transfer of service portal applications. And it very well could be that your district might have a different person who enters transfer of service on a child with disabilities versus a person who does the LEP portions. That could be common. A lot of times it is the same person, but I would not think anything weird of it if there were 2 different people who had access in there. Also, unfortunately, if you do call the Bureau of School Financial Services for access in here, you're not going to get too far because we simply cannot do that for you. It really is for that district administrator to do. If that district administrator cannot remember how to get in, they need to contact Open Enrollment. And I've left the email address there for you. So all right, let's be mindful of the timeline for submitting transfer of service applications. This timeline is also on our website. But if you are the district applying for transfer of service, you are the requesting district, and your responsibilities will be to Part A and Part C. The previous district is responsible for Part B. So if I am District A, I'm sending out a request to ask District B to confirm that my student came from your district. However, please be a friendly neighbor. Monitor your portals. If you notice that District B has not responded, please just send them a kind email or give them a phone call. Oftentimes, if you're Part B, maybe you didn't have a Part A to file, so you don't even think about transfer of service. And now you're District A and you're waiting and waiting and maybe getting frustrated. Just save the frustration. Yeah. Watch the timelines, and again, just give a nice call out to that district and say, hey, I did this. There's a lot of turnover that happens in business offices, so for whatever reason, um, maybe that person just maybe that person's new or whatever and just doesn't know they need access in here, um, or the contacts could be old. So that would be, again, circling back to that PI 1500 district contacts, making sure that um, that is as up to date as possible. I would like to mention here too that changes in the transfer of service portal can happen up until the date that that part closes. So for example, you will be able to make changes in Part A up until September 11th. And you are also encouraged not to wait until the last filing day. You are encouraged to file early. Um, and again, you will be able to make changes up until that time frame. So quickly then, completing Part A of the transfer of service portal. Please note that on this graph, I do have PII blacked out. We are not going to be going into the portal. I just wanted to provide a visual. I don't want to accidentally get into a district and it just wouldn't be good. So it's just the questions that the Part A asks, or for the requesting district, you'll have to know where that student came from, their enrollment date. You'll need to confirm they came to you with that IEP or LEP proficient, and also certify if the district has the resources to meet the needs of the student. So kind of thinking back to that decision tree, you should be all ready to answer these questions. And you will be asked further on in Part A, you'll be asked to enter in the increased cost of servicing that student. Which leads to Part B. Part B will be that responding district. If a district has filed a claim and you are the previous district, your district will get an email. Again, please be a friendly neighbor, Part Bs, and complete the Part B request as quickly as possible. Someone else is waiting on the other end to complete out the claim and kind of check this off of their list of to-dos as well. Again, circling back to that district contacts, that is why it is so very important that the proper people are noted on the district contacts as the person getting information, so that those emails come directly to the proper person. If there are discrepancies in the portal and your Part B responding to Part A and vice versa, call each other, work those things out amongst yourselves. Maybe it's a withdrawal date or an IEP status, but you really do need to work those questions out amongst the districts. And again, District A, please come on in here and check the timeline, see if your districts have responded, and reach out to them. The last part of the application then is Part C. Part C can only be completed if Part B has been done. So the requesting district, Part A district, you must go back into the application, the portal, and complete it. That is when that application is considered final. There will be questions here on putting in new costs, and you will have to do that as well. Remember, I know I'm almost out of time here, but I want one important example here for you. If you have a student that comes into your district that causes an increase of service, say it was one student, and now you needed to hire a teacher. And for easy math, I'm going to say that teacher cost $100,000 with salary and benefits. Here's where you would enter. You would firstly would have had to have entered that student into Part A, and it'll ask for those costs. That new cost is $100,000. Now you have 4 more students come into your district, and they're going to be using that teacher. You now have those resources. Technically, you do not need to list them in your transfer service portal. It was really that first student that came in and caused the tip to increase your services. What would happen if you would say, oh, I got a student in, let's say, um, I got a new student in September and we had to hire a teacher quick. Um, and then in October, 4 more students came and you enter them into the transfer of service portal and you say, oh, I'm going to tie that student to this teacher. And that teacher was $100,000. And now you've tied $100,000 to 5 students. It's going to come across here in Part C that you've increased your revenue or you increased your services by $500,000. You're taking that $100,000 salary times 5. You do not want to do that. That would be an statement of what that increase was. So just I can get more into that. If you have specific examples, please feel free to email me. I think the main point is be very cognizant of what you are entering in for the costs of the student. Were they able to use resources you had or increase more? Um, I'm just going to leave this some important tidbits for some good success. Again, we just talked about them, gaining access, entering applications, updating contacts. You really want a good, successful reporting time. So um, that concludes what I have for transfer service. I know that was quick. I hope you're still awake. But I'm hoping you have a little bit better understanding of what transfer of service is, who is eligible and how to apply. I have included more resources here that are available on our website, including training materials for the PI 5000 Transfer of Service portal. That will go into details on exactly what to do for A, B, and C. Also goes more into granting access, even though there's a link here as well for that. Um, Again, feel free to bookmark this page um, on your bookmarks bar if you'd like. If you feel you will be using this information more. And again, remember, I do have some additional slides following this presentation. If you would like to review some of our frequently asked questions, maybe you have a question and it would be answered there, and also more information about the narrative transfer of service. And much like a pupil transfer of service, the narrative also has a decision tree to go along with that. Here's my contact information for anybody that might have more questions on transfer of service. We do have our department does have a general email bin too for other questions, but I certainly would welcome any transfer of service questions. Yeah, again, those are additional resources, but that's what I have for you. And I hope you come away with knowing something a little bit more.
Thank you, Stephanie. Does look like we have a few questions in our parking lot, but they're not specifically related, or they're not related to transfer of service, actually. So we'll
Okay.
maybe pause on that. We have about 1 minute before our break. I don't know if there were any specific transfer of service questions that somebody wanted to drop in the chat or parking lot here in our last minute.
And I think too, if there are questions that come up, you have my email here, or if they come up in the chat and somebody wants to send them over to me into my email, I would be glad to either give a call back or respond over email.
Perfect.
We did
Here
have one
is
just pop
just
in, Lindsay.
yep, one question. Does a county for birth to 3 need to do Part B?
No, I did not get into that specifically in my presentation. Uh, account, it really, right now, our transfer of service portal, is a great question too. Um, I was relying on learn by doing. Um, but really, right now in our portal, the portal only allows for if a student has come from another Wisconsin LEA, that would be the responding, um, that would be the Part B application part of that. However, Part A still needs to indicate, for this example, came from a birth to 3. The reason why they can't go in and respond is because they don't have access into that portal. They're not part of a district contacts. However, don't be alarmed if a district does call out or call you and say, can you provide some documentation? I'd like to keep this with my student in case I'm questioned about it. Um, so, I mean, that answer for the portal is no, but don't be alarmed if a district does call and confirm with you or ask for some sort of documentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so at this time, we will be taking a break and we will return at 11 o'clock. All right, welcome back. Next up, as you can see on your screen here, Rachel Kodorovic, the RSN for CISA 7, is getting set up to talk through uh, some more of the high leverage practices for special education. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks, Lindsay, and welcome back, everyone. As Lindsay said, here we go with the HLPs, and today brings us to our final primary area, intensify and intervene as needed. And so this graphic, of course, shows the 22 HLPs and how they are, the relationships between the pillars and those 4 primary areas. Of course, you'll notice the embedded HLPs are linked and aligned so that when you work with your staff and leaders in your district to teach, connect, and implement those HLPs, you can use this graphic. So today we are going to really zero in, again, as I said, on intensify and intervene as needed, which is HLP 20. And that talks about provide intensive instruction for academics and behavior. And the embedded HLP is HLP 10, conduct functional behavioral assessments to develop individual student behavior plans. The exciting part about this one for me or for us is I just taught session 2 for my induction year 2-3 participants, and this was our focus. So we talked a lot about intensify and intervene as needed. And I also just had the pleasure of hosting Catherine Smith, our statewide FBA trainer, at our CISA to do some training here around FBAs. And so I'm hoping that you're all taking advantage of those regional trainings as well with her. So just a lot of touch points on this particular primary area for my CISA in the last few weeks. But this one is super important also because of the connection to the multi-level system of supports, right? As we think about intensify and intervene as needed, obviously it's related to special education, but also to all students and each and every student. And what does that look like? So again, the resource for leadership guides for you, of course, we always like to point you in this direction of what does it look like for teachers who are effectively providing that intensive instruction, teach tips for those school leaders, and then questions to prompt discussion. We have the links here for the Senior Center, of course, available to all of you. And then the next piece that we like to show is, of course, a snippet of a video. And today, the snippet that we chose is really an analogy, which I felt a nice connection to, because sometimes I feel like if I hadn't chose education, I maybe would have chose forensic pathology. So I connected well with today's. But the second video clip that we would have shown So if you're writing notes or you maybe want to make note of this, is from about 5 minutes to 8 minutes. It really does talk about the graphic that AI helped me generate to the right here, which really does work through what does HLP 20 talk about? Those clearly defined goals, systematic, explicit, and well-paced instruction, frequent progress monitoring, the many OTRs or opportunities to respond, and then frequent and immediate feedback. In that 3 minutes, it really would give teachers a good overview of HLP 20. So I'm going to show, hopefully we can get this to work this week, the short video clip. Lindsay, are you seeing the Vimeo? Okay.
Yes. Yep.
So hopefully we can get the video to work with sound and all of that jazz this week. I'm going to show just a short analogy, but also if you want to note it, from 5 to 8 minutes in this video is also a nice clip for teachers if they really need a synopsis of what HLP 20 is. So let's see if we have some.
Imagine a team of skilled investigators, such as
You have
journalists
sound?
or detectives, that are working together to uncover the full story behind a complex case. They don't begin by making assumptions or jumping to conclusions. Instead, they begin by gathering evidence, collecting documents, interviewing witnesses, and carefully observing what's happening on the ground. Each piece of information adds a layer of understanding, helping to reveal both what is visible and what lies beneath the surface. As patterns begin to emerge, the investigative team begins to analyze clues, cross-reference facts, identify inconsistencies, and ask deeper questions. Is there missing information? Are there hidden causes that explain what we're observing? The investigators' jobs are not merely to record data, but to interpret with purpose. When the evidence points towards a possible explanation, the investigators move from analysis to intentional action, testing hypotheses, consulting experts, and crafting response plans. Each next step is guided by what the evidence reveals, not by guesswork. But the process doesn't end there. Once new strategies are in place, whether publishing findings or implementing solutions, the investigative team keeps gathering follow-up data, checking whether the intervention had the intended effect or whether further adjustments are still needed. In this way, the investigator's work is systematic, iterative, and deeply purposeful. The truth emerges through a process of ongoing inquiry, data collection, and adaptation. Just as investigative journalists or detectives collect evidence, analyze patterns, and act with intent, special educators follow a similar cycle when providing intensive instruction. Data-based individualization requires educators to observe, collect, and analyze student data, form hypotheses about learning or behavioral challenges, and adapt instruction accordingly. Growth is never left to chance. It's the result of careful investigation, targeted supports, and responsive actions.
Okay. So then I guess my question for you, if you want to drop this in the chat, based on the video, is where do you think this might be breaking down for your team? And maybe a tool to help you with that is to look at the self-assessment tool. And so we have a screenshot of this for you on the screen, HLP 20 on the left and 10 on the right. But when we think about that team, right, and we are observing and we're progress monitoring or we're collecting data, so we have that collection, that analyzing, that observing. Where is that breaking down for your teams or your system, maybe, is the question. And maybe if you're vulnerable enough, could you drop that in the chat? Okay, high school. Yeah, thanks for being vulnerable, Courtney. I would say that at my regional meetings, I get a lot of questions about high school, both on the testing, how are we progress monitoring piece, what interventions are being used. So I hear that at in my region as well. Not aligning our IEP disability related needs and goals. Okay. That's super interesting. CISA 6, thanks for being vulnerable there, because I often say if we do a really good job with our root cause analysis and our disability related need, the rest of the IEP writes itself, right? And so then people are like, the IEP doesn't write itself. But essentially, if we do a good job at the beginning, the rest of it should be super easy. Knowing what intervention tools are available. Yeah, for sure. And sometimes it comes down to the communication, right? Who's doing what and for what purpose, and when are we coming together to analyze that? So these self-assessment tools are available to you. Again, hopefully, I mean, I think the FBA one we tend to use more because there are times when FBAs are required, right? But the intensive instruction, I think sometimes we just do our progress reports and we forget about when do we really need to intensify intervention, because we look at tier 3 is equivalent to an IEP, for example. And I guess I would encourage you to think about what does your system look like, and do students with IEPs have access to tier 2 supports also? Because I've also heard in my region, and I guess I'll just say my region, sometimes that's a fight for students with IEPs to have access to tier 2 supports for different reasons. And so what does that look like in your system? And ask those questions. And then what is the intersection of academic and behavior supports? Because the reality is students should have both, right? And they should intersect, right? Because perhaps they really don't need much for reading and math, but they have a high need in behavior. And we need to really be careful on how we are supporting both of those things. So all of those things are important. And I would say, you know, if you have some questions about that or need some support in that, feel free to reach out to your RSN or your EMLSS coach. That I think is really critical, especially when focusing on this HLP. So then here is, again, just another resource that we share at each of these sessions. This is for HLP 20. HLP 10 is coming soon, but I would again point you back to the DPI website, because there have been many FBA and BIP resources released on the DPI website as of as recently as this fall. So while this is again coming from HLP 20 and thinking about what's effective and what's highly effective, the department and Catherine Smith have really released a lot of resources around the FBAs and BIPs in our state. And how do we be a little more culturally responsive and trauma sensitive around FBAs and BIPs for students? So I would point you to the DPI website for that as well. And then some guiding questions to really think about when I thought about this from a coaching perspective. You know, why is it important for us to think about multiple sources of data? And that's really coming from that comprehensive lens, right? Shifting again from, are we doing an SLD referral or an EBD referral? There isn't or shouldn't be such a thing anymore. It really is the lens of a comprehensive evaluation. Or if I need to intensify a reading intervention, are we bringing multiple sources of data to the table because perhaps we've missed the boat on the root cause or the disability related need? And so how do we come back to those 5 whys, or what are we bringing to the table to make that decision? What are some of the barriers to successful implementation of data-based individualization? Sometimes I think we don't realize that the barriers might be in the teaching process or in the environment, right? Like we need to go back to that Riot ISIL, and it's not about the learner. What are the other things that are going on? And then HLP 10, why should school leaders encourage and promote those team-oriented approach to conducting and implementing FBAs? Again, thinking about it's not a school psych's job necessarily to just do an FBA. Maybe they're the lead person, but how are we all coming together for a comprehensive evaluation, and how is their collective responsibility for that? And similar coaching connections, you know, what have we already tried and what did the data tell us? That's a really good question that I like to ask my induction grant coaches, right? Because they'll be like, we tried everything. I don't have any more tools in my toolbox. And so I like to say, well, what have you tried and for how long? Because sometimes it's like, well, I tried it for a day, and it didn't work. Well, we need a little more data than that. Or what is one small manageable change I can make, right? So baby steps in the right direction, and then let's get some data and look for some patterns. And then how are we ensuring the skills taught in this intervention are transferring to the core? We often think about pulling kids to the resource room for a variety of reasons for that SDI or that intensive intervention, but are we being purposeful in how we are thinking about that transfer of skills? So just some coaching connections as we think about bringing this back to our buildings. As always, we have some resources for you from the Iris Center, HLPs and ChatGPT. Who doesn't love a little AI connection? That was kind of a cool one. And then some Cedar Center, and then some practice-based learning opportunities for some of you that are like, you know what, I just want to get my hands on this and jump in a little bit more. And then finally, just a quote to end today. Within intensive instruction, students experience a brisk pace of lesson routines, high levels of opportunities to respond, and receive immediate corrective feedback with teachers and peers to practice with their learning. Of course, being so critical that all of these things are in place, or we know that really, truly effective learning isn't happening. So thanks, Lindsay. That felt like it was a really like down and dirty, quick 15 minutes. But man, oh man, I guess that was about the time that I had. So if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But otherwise, I think it's about time I'm supposed to hand it over.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel. Dawn, we're running a couple minutes ahead. Would you be ready to go ahead and get started?
Hi, this is Dawn. I totally will.
All right, so welcome to Dawn Soto, who is going to be talking about some accessible educational materials.
All right, let me screen share. Can you see my screen?
We can see the whole screen right now, so not
Awesome.
just a presentation if that's what you're. Yep,
Perfect. All right. Now
perfect.
you can see the whole thing.
Yep, looks great.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Dawn Soto. I work for DPI through the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We are part of the Division of Access and Opportunity, or DAO. Other teams in our division are the Wisconsin Educational Opportunities Program, or WEOP, and the Wisconsin Educational Services Program for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, WESP-DHH. And then we are the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired, or WCBVI. We are housed in Janesville, but I'll tell you a little bit more just about what's under the roof at WCBVI, so you kind of understand. We have the state's only residential state school for students who are blind, the Wisconsin School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, or WSBVI. We have an outreach team. So I'm the outreach director for blindness, visual impairment. And then we have an accessible educational materials team through WCBVI specific to blind and visually impaired and deaf blind. So I always like to sort of give you the lay of the land of who we are. I was thinking of acronyms too. I will also say WCBVI. And so just wanted you to know where we fall in terms of being on one of the teams at DPI. We're very closely connected with many of the special education directors and staff as well, ed consultants too. I will be saying AIM a lot. So as the title tells you here, accessible educational materials. And I will be saying NIMIS and NIMAC, but I'll define them when I get there. So I also don't mind if things are put into the chat, but I'm in full presentation mode, so I may not see them. If someone is willing to just voice to me that a question has been asked, please feel free um, to just stop me and ask a question. All right. I have a couple of roles. I am the outreach director. I am the lead vision consultant for DPI. Um, uh, like I said, our AIM Center, I coordinate that. And then the American Printing House for the Blind, or APH, is a congressional act that provides support for students who are formally registered, who are blind, visually impaired, or deaf-blind, and I manage those federal funds as the ex officio trustee for the larger accounts that I would probably also be working with you if you had students who were registered. Today, I added just one learning objective so that I also brought you some resources for you as LEAs to understand responsibilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act Title II, including available support through some federal grants at the federal level. Uh, Also, number two, understand NIMUS, NIMAC, which I'll define. If you don't know those yet, don't worry. Your FAPE obligations for students who have print disabilities, including I dig a little deeper into blind, visually impaired, and deafblind, including what are resources available for AIM right now. And then the third is really to help you understand the contract language that's required when you are procuring curriculum out in your districts. What needs to be included in that language, and give you specific examples along the way. So there we go. Let's get going. The first one. You may have heard about the Americans with Disabilities Act Title II requirements, and for state agencies, federal agencies, which includes school districts. This was introduced in April of 2024 with requirements for this coming April of 2026. I've given you the link to the fact sheet, which is directly to the rule on accessibility for web content and mobile apps. It's the in title state and local governments, but it includes things like, police departments and school districts, public schools. So if you want to explore the fact sheet, you certainly can. Also, we've got an amazing center that is funded by the Office of Special Education Programs called the National Center on Accessible Digital Educational Materials and Instruction, or they call themselves Academy, starting with the N. They have a beautiful roadmap for state and local educational agencies. If you're likely already working with your webmasters and out in your districts. If you're not, the roadmap here for you by Academy is fabulous, and they provide technical assistance. So you will be able to get to their center with the link on this page as well. So just wanted to make sure you knew about resources that are available out there. Okay, jump to learning objectives 2 and 3. They're kind of combined. I want you to understand NIMUS and NIMAC, just general definitions and digging a little deeper. The FAPE obligations about students with AIM, that they have print disabilities, including if they're blind, visually impaired, or deafblind. And what resources do we have in Wisconsin for you surrounding AIM? Also, want you to understand that contract language, like I said. You're about to procure textbooks for or math has a little bit more to be included in your contract language with your publishers. Okay, basically the names, and I've linked to I think AIMCAST, the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials. So you'd be able to dig deeper to see the definitions. So, and NIMUS, the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard, and NIMAC is the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Center. So NIMAS and NIMAC are both provisions in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So they are provisions in IDEA 2004. Essentially, NIMAS is the standard. It's a standard used by publishers of textbooks. They prepare electronic files that are that would be stored in the NIMAC. The publishers are required to do this, and the publishers know to do this when you include that contract language we'll talk about a little bit later in your procurement for textbooks. You work with a publisher, you're going to, purchase something, and I get a little bit deeper as we go. So the gist of it, NIMAS, NIMAC, many people think a NIMAS file is something that you can just like download and put onto a student's device and then start working with it. And that's not the case. A NIMAS file is worked up with a lot of technical content, but a materials producer can work with that. So we'll go into what does that mean a little bit later, but basically wanted you to have just the understanding of the baseline there for NIMAS and NIMAC. I know that we have a short time today together, so I wanted you to have something to go back to. I've got 3 great videos. The first one is what is NIMAC? The second is how does NIMAC actually work? And the third is coordinating with NIMAC. What does that mean for me as like you, a special ed director? Why it's important and digging a little bit deeper. 3 great videos. They're not too long. This will be probably an important slide for you to bookmark and go back to. Accessible educational materials and support in Wisconsin. So DPI has a bulletin 20.02. You may want to bookmark that on your favorites if you haven't already. It is quite long, but what it tells you what AIM is. AIM in Wisconsin, we've got 2 ways to help you. CESA 2 has the Wisconsin AIM Center. I like to say largely for other print disabilities and things that are not specific to blindness, visual impairment, deaf blindness. If you end up seeking help at CESA 2 AIM Center, they send you to us at WCBVI because our AIM Center focuses more heavily on that blindness component and vice versa. If something arrives to us and needs to be a help ticket for CESA 2, we go back and forth with them. So those are the 2 main supports right now for you in Wisconsin about AIM. On this slide, I've linked to the AIM Center for CESA 2 so you can get there in the title of the slide. They have professionals. You can submit an AIM request like a help ticket through their AIM website. They have help videos available to assist individuals with the process. Districts can receive phone and email support for any questions that you have around like larger AIM, students with print disabilities, and their website has a lot of resources surrounding AIM as well. The WCBVI AIM Center provides things more specific to blindness, visual impairment, deaf blindness. And that's also with us through statute, through our center. So we provide assistive technology devices specific to blindness and visual impairment, some equipment, braille writers. If you've had a student who's blind before, you may receive from us a loan of 2 braille writers, one for home, one for school. And several other types of braille writers available as well. You can request support from us about textbooks, educational learning materials, especially for students who qualify through APH, American Printing House for the Blind Federal Quota Program, so APH. Your TVIs out there, your teachers of the visually impaired, are usually the ones making the requests for materials, and usually you designate them to conduct the quota, which is happening right now. And so you will know if you've got a smart student with a braille writer, you're signing for them as well. But we also help provide textbook research and vendor referrals. We can research for you or train you and your staff on how to conduct the research as well. To find a material producer who can provide that for me. I need this high school English series we're ordering. It's never been created in Braille before. Now what? Your teachers of the visually impaired usually are the ones who do that textbook research form with us, but we then give you a referral to a materials producer who is willing to take on your project to create Braille or large print or an alternative format. We also have stacks. We've kind of like a library too. We have Braille and large print textbooks, and then a lot of learning aids, especially mostly from the Printing House for the Blind. So when you walk into our center, you might see a 58 volume Braille textbook for biology, and maybe a district out in the state had used it. They had to purchase it. They probably won't need it again if it's a small district. There may not be another Braille reading student coming down the pipe. That district, if they don't need it again, they send it to us. It goes on our shelves, and other LEAs can like check with us. Do you have that book? Often your teachers of the visually impaired say, we need a book. We look first on our inventory on our file and our repository of materials and books. We make sure we don't already have it. In some cases, we might, and then you can loan that at no cost. We just manage the materials for you. We keep those for about 10 to 12 years on our shelves. Okay, defining AIM. The National AIM Center defines it as print and technology-based educational materials, including print and electronic textbooks, related core materials, and the important word there being technology in today's world. And I'll get into a little bit more about technology and the changes with AIM to ensure that you understand format. Who should receive AIM? So any individual, regardless of other disability, but essentially students who are blind, have visual impairments, perceptual, reading disabilities, or physical disabilities, students who may not be able to manipulate, hold a book, focus to move their eyes to the extent that could be normally acceptable for reading. So that's basically pulled from our DPI 20.02 bulletin, but I just kind of wanted you to see it right there, the who should receive AIM. So the provision of AIM required to receive the federal special education funding. So all LEAs sign assurance documents, right, to receive federal funding. And part of that requires by federal law that the LEA provides instructional materials in a timely manner to students with disabilities as required in IDEA. So the tricky part there can be where the breakdown can happen, even down to that local level at the classroom with the regular education teacher and building principal, with making sure that what is going to be taught in the classroom at that moment, that the student who needs it in an alternative format has it at the same time. I like to say if Sally Smith doesn't have it in Braille, then the rest of the class shouldn't be accessing it yet. So that is a dynamic that I'm sure that many of you are aware of if you've had students who have had to have alternative formats. There are a lot of the LEA responsibilities under NIMAC, and I really wanted to make sure to give you those. The first is obviously timely delivery. And then we like to talk about implementing approaches for being prepared for those NIMAS file sets from the NIMAC. Now, you're not downloading them. We actually have two authorized users. They're called AUs, authorized users, where if your district has procured a textbook and you have added the contractual language that you're about to learn, you will get to the point where that file set will be in the NIMAC, in the digital library of the NIMAC, so that when we find you someone who can braille your book for your student, the file is there and we release it to them basically. And that request usually comes from the material producer. You're really not part of that. You've done your work when you have the language in your contracts. The publisher sends the file into the NIMAC that the material like a Braille company or a Braille prison program, one of those entities that creates accessible content, they get it because you've done your work on the front end. So just kind of wanted you to understand like behind the scenes of that. And then support. So identify approaches to developing and delivering those accessible formats to your students who meet criteria for AIM. Consider using entities such as the American Printing House for the Blind. You can always come to me and schedule to meet with me. If you want to know more about APH for textbooks, because they do have a lot of textbooks they have already created. The National Library Service for the Blind, which in Wisconsin is called the Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library. It says Braille, but it's not just for students who are blind. It's for students with other print disabilities. It tends to be missed as an added resource. Bookshare, those are just a few examples. You can have multiple types of memberships for some of these entities as well. For example, the National Library Service, Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library, your district could have a district membership. Students get free digital players that are audio, free small Braille reading players. So just a few ideas for you to be thinking about what type of membership you need out in your districts for some of these entities. Another sort of LEA responsibility is, I think, working with us to let us help you. Like I gave you the link again to CISA 2 for their research and help ticket support, and then our Center for Research Vendor Referrals. And then you may, if you have a high needs Braille reading student, you may want to contract with a conversion house or a media producer. They're called accessible media producers or amps. We can help you find an amp if you know, especially that you need something like teacher-made materials. More than ever across the nation, teachers and schools are using less textbooks and more teacher-made materials or open education resources. In some cases, they don't have ISBN numbers. It makes it a lot more tricky to request the materials for them, but the same obligations hold for the LEA responsibility. Even though there might not be an ISBN number, the materials still need to be created and put under the child's fingertips or in front of them at the same time their peers receive them. And we can do the textbook research request and help you. We can even help find you an AMP. So make a note of this page. If you think you need a material producer, you're going to connect with me later to make sure that I can help you. We can help research to find you one. A little bit more about your responsibility under NIMAC. Consider the purchase of those formats. Born accessible, tricky because not all materials that are designed to be accessible for all are actually accessible. Um, so there's some trickiness when something says born accessible. You will really want to work closely to establish and define policies regarding purchase, timelines for purchase. I like say timelines because it can take one full year for curricular materials, a new history textbook, a new math textbook that's a brand new copyright, has never been brailled before, for example. It can take a year to transcribe that. And so the timelines of sometimes making a new purchase for curricular content, like July 1 at the start of a new fiscal year, will never give enough time for Braille to be created by, the start of school. So assessing AIM needs in digital learning plans that you have out there with your students so that you're forecasting through like a committee, including TVIs or teachers of the visually impaired on digital curricular teams can be really, really helpful. So that you're sort of planning. Teachers of the visually impaired tend to have a little bit more of that knowledge of some of the guidance and requirements under NIMAC. About digital. So you heard me say kind of, born accessible might not mean accessible, and it's tricky. The U.S. Department of Ed clarified more information about print materials in 2020. I've given you the link here to the Notice of Interpretation, or NOI, and some definitions. So per the NOI, digital doesn't necessarily mean accessible. Um, students must receive high quality digital materials in the format they require at the same time sighted peers receive them. Perfect example, learning management systems. Um, Schools will now be having to ensure those learning management systems are digitally accessible under, like what we talked about, the ADA Title II rules, but also through the notice of interpretation, a learning management system, perhaps during COVID. Some of those use what we would call like a static graphic image that has text on it. A student who would be blind and use a screen reader technology, it would not read that. It would say graphic, graphic. It wouldn't read the actual print there. So there is a little bit more onus and responsibility to make sure that those digital materials meet not only the ADA Title II requirements, but meet this notice of interpretation requirements. And I've got a little bit of resource for you in case, because this slide could be like, oh. Um, so um, te a little bit more about that. Digital doesn't mean accessible. Text-based digital materials are just not consistently designed for those who use assistive technology, especially like screen readers. They don't have headings that are designated. They don't always have things that screen readers must use to access even image descriptions or alt text. So some of your learners out there are using assistive technology to read and navigate text and images in digital materials. So I've linked that they must meet those technical specifications. Kind of maybe a chat between you and your publishers also to make sure when you're going to have text that's like a digital text to go along with a curriculum that's meeting all of the requirements as well. Screen readers or text to speech or switches might be examples of some of those AT devices students are using to try to get in there on that digital material. It just doesn't always work because it might not be set up correctly. Your responsibility under NIMAC. So Wisconsin districts opted in to the NIMAC. LEAs, when they opted in, had, it's basically part of the obligatory duty that you include NIMAS language in your publisher agreements. So I've linked that for you. Specific language, it's pretty easy. It goes right to the NIMAS guidance. I've also linked the Office of Special Ed and Rehabilitative Services, or OSERS, letter specifically about math. So you must actually ask your publishers to use Math LML 3 structure. And that is also included in that OSERS letter. So like going to have a Braille student or a student with other print disability, and you're going to need to make sure that the textbooks that you um, are going to be ordering will have this language in the contracts. This will force your publishers to drop those files as they need to into NIMAS or into the NIMAC. Hope that makes sense. Math can be tricky. It's just tricky. Your responsibilities under NIMAC, I kind of just dropped this slide because I wanted to make sure you knew how to contact NIMAC. Many districts, many LEAs will go directly and say, oh, I've got this learning management system. I just learned it had to be accessible. The NIMAC is happy to work with learning management system companies. Like they want digital content to be starting to be added into the NIMAC. So NIMAC themselves, they are ready to work with vendors, companies, those who are providing digital content. So They will help you work through any contract language if you have a question about, did I write this right? So NIMAC at aph.org. You're hearing APH there, and that's the Printing House for the Blind. And many people get a little confused, as they should probably, because NIMAC is housed with the Printing House for the Blind, but it's not just for blindness. So it's for any student with print disabilities. So don't let the aph.org throw you. The NIMAC is just housed in Louisville at the American Printing House for the Blind. I like to suggest strategies, which are LEAs, curriculum directors, AT specialists, TVIs, other specialists in your school that help with technology or IT support, and directors and coordinators. Make teams, really. The TVIs will be the ones to help you because they're often using our outreach supports and AIM supports for textbook research. That will help you know whether a 2026 edition of the brand new biology book for high school has already been transcribed into Braille, or if it hasn't. Ensure that procurement language and check with either us, but really that NIMAC that you just saw the email for on the last slide. Check with NIMAC about that language. Because really that's your step to put those files into the NIMAC. So, and really timely curricular decision making. July 1st and a new start of a fiscal year is really hard to make sure that you as an LEA will have all the things on the desk of your students that you need to ensure that FAPE obligation. It's hard. Some districts have waited a year to implement something they purchased at the start of a new fiscal year because they knew it was going to take a year to get that book in Braille, and they had a student who was going to be a Braille reader. So what is required after the student qualifies for AIM? Essentially, always following back to that AIM in a timely manner, AIM in accessible, usable format, instruction for access and use by the learner. That learner is going to need to implement so that AIM is weaving into the IEP, obviously, because this could be tech access and other things, and then training for staff and families. Students going home to work on homework, obviously that's weaving through your staff into the IEP in many different ways. And then Braille can be a little different, so I like to give you a little bit more about Braille. So students who are blind and visually impaired, Braille in the law for IDEA is the default. Students who are blind or visually impaired or deafblind will learn Braille. The IEP team, through the comprehensive evaluation, that's where we say that the teacher of the visually impaired with their areas of expertise conduct assessments, and maybe Braille is not going to be taught because of that comprehensive data from the evaluation. So, however, the materials for Braille still at the same time of peers is really reinforced in an Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, Dear Colleague letter from 2013, and I've linked that here for you. So school districts can acquire AIM many different ways. In a summary, the accessible media producers, we can help you find them. They operate under a copyright exemption. That's why the material producers can access that NIMUS file from a publisher. They are not seeking to sell anything. They are seeking to support students in the nation who need access to alternative formats. That's why those AMPs that are out there operate under that copyright exemption. And basically coming directly from publishers into that NIMAC. And again, for us, I added our AIM Center there because that really is where we do the biggest bulk of our work in supporting and helping you find a material producer or someone to take on your projects for your students. There's a little bit that I can tell you and some extra resources. The APH has a database called the Louis database, like think Louis Braille. It does include files that are in the NIMAC, Bookshare files, Learning Ally files, and files that are made by pretty much every accessible media producer in the nation. If you're looking for a specific ISBN number, we use this database when we are searching to help conduct research for you. You and your districts and your teachers of the visually impaired, or you can also do this on your own. And so I've given you the Louis training video from the American Printing House for the Blind. It's very helpful. Bookmark this if you think I want to learn to do this a little bit on my own. I can also train with you, as I often will with teachers of the visually impaired. Many of them want to learn how to do this on their own. Bookshare, a program supported by the Office of Special Education Programs. Many of you may already be accessing Bookshare, which is amazing. They have a fabulous social media community. So there are a lot of resources that I've linked for you as well related to Bookshare. Learning Ally, a national nonprofit. The nice thing about Learning Ally, it is audio. However, they use live reader voices, and some students learn a lot better when they are maybe reading their book in print, but also have a live human reading to them. So there's a great Learning Ally educator community that I've linked for you. And this one is the National Library Service that I mentioned earlier, the Wisconsin Talking Book and Braille Library, or they call themselves Woodable, WTBBL. Don't let the Braille part, you know, um, throw you, because this is for students that also have other print disabilities that cannot, or physical disabilities that cannot access a book. Students would qualify, districts would qualify to have an institutional membership. And receive free talking books, free downloads of digital talking books, also live human readers, and free playback devices. Through Woodable, they have the online access where you can be looking right at their catalog online. I've linked that for you if you're just interested, want to take a look. This is not textbooks. This is like chapter books, things that your English teachers are using, that sort of thing. And NFB Newsline. NFB is National Federation of the Blind. Don't let that throw you because it says blind. This is a free audio service for people who are registered with Woodable through the National Library Service, which could be you and your districts. There are free newspapers read um, with a live reader through the phone. And your students who are blind, low vision, have other print disabilities can access this, not only newspapers throughout Wisconsin, but 500 different publications, job listings, emergency weather alerts. People are just not using it quite enough, and I wanted to make sure you all knew that. So that's it. I'm right at time. I made sure that you have questions if you ask about other print disabilities. I've linked the Wisconsin AIMS Center for you. And I've also linked our email address at our Accessible Materials Center in the Center for the Blind in Janesville. And I did give you a second presentation for you to peruse at your own time about specifically about APH and the federal quota, should you have more questions. But you can always request a training through our accessible materials email here. And thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Always a good reminder that these materials, not only that there's an obligation to be looking for these materials, but that they're out there and there are, solutions for students where it might seem like the solution is trickier to find. So thank you so much. Just a reminder as we wrap up here today. Our next meeting is April 8th, and that one is a 3-hour meeting. That is one that begins at 9 a.m. Again, a reminder that you do need to register for each month separately. So if you have not registered for the April meeting yet, you can do so from the link in your agenda. And the topics for April include comprehensive special education evaluation, especially looking at needs in reading for students who are deaf and hard of hearing, Section 504, another look at high leverage practices, as well as early childhood and indicator 6 information. A reminder that if you would like to add questions to the chat, that we will take a look at those and respond as appropriate. I know there were some questions added earlier today, and so as RSN, we'll take a look at that and get you some answers or direct those to the right people to find answers. Thank you so much. I hope that everybody is getting an opportunity to enjoy a little bit warmer weather here for a few days before we have maybe more winter weather. So that's spring in Wisconsin, right? Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.